Conflicts are the third way to score points, possibly giving you big chunks of points at a time, and more importantly, they're a great way to take control of another player's monuments and give you a better board position. So you have Clem Flapdoodle sitting across from you, and he's got this monster kingdom, and he's just getting points after points. It's time to start a conflict. When does a conflict happen? When there are two leaders of the same color in a kingdom. So Clem Flapdoodle is over there with his green trader piece, just raking in tons of points because he's next to two monuments. What are we going to do about it? All right, we're going to start a conflict. There are two ways that we can do that. We can try to start a revolution, and we do that simply by taking our green trader piece and dropping it right into that kingdom and say, I want to be leader of this now, let's have a revolution. Or you could have your green trader piece in a kingdom over yonder, and then connect it to Clem Flapdoodle's kingdom with tiles, thus having two green trader piece in the same kingdom, which will start a war. Knowing the difference in these two conflicts and how they work is one of the hardest parts to learn in this game, so I'll go over each in detail. So let's talk about a revolution again. So say you like Clem's kingdom, and you want to take it over with a revolution. You just take that green piece and you drop it in. You place your leader of the same color in a legal space. A legal space is an empty space next to a temple, and you'll see who wins. So remember, a revolution is when someone just drops in a leader on that kingdom that already has a leader of the same color. When you're starting a revolution, whoever is the most supported by the priests, hail the great god Ketchup, will win, which means you always fight it out with red tiles. It doesn't matter if you're fighting with green leaders, blue leaders, black leaders, or red leaders. You always fight it out with red tiles in a revolution. You may want to set up a situation like this, or look at a picture from the rule book showing an internal conflict, what I'm calling a revolution. When you are fighting a revolution, you count the adjacent temples and any temples I want to play from behind my screen. So I drop in my green trader. Say I drop it in a position that's directly adjacent to two temples. I have a temple on either side of me. So my starting score is 2. Say Clem's piece is only right next to one temple. So the starting scores are 2 to 1. Now I have those 6 tiles behind my screen, and I may have some temples there. I can play as many temples as I like to try to win. So say I play 2 more red temples. I add those to my other 2, so now I have a score of 4. Now Clem gets to go. Clem gets to play as many temples as he wants to try to beat me. When you're defending, you only have to tie what the person has put out against you. Let's say he has 3 red temples. He puts out those 3 red temples, the score is 4 to 4. The defender wins. Now, if I had more red temples, I don't get a chance to play anymore. I have to play all the ones I want to play right away. It's a one-shot deal. So, I lost. Boo-hoo. Whoever is the loser in this fight, their piece gets kicked back off the board. And the winner gets to keep their place, and they will get 1 red point for successfully revolting or fighting off the revolt. One more revolution example to make sure you've got it. Kermit and Fozzie are playing against each other. Kermit decides to revolt in Fozzie's really nice kingdom. He's got a black king there and a monument next to it. So Kermit drops his black king piece next to a temple. Fozzie has his king piece next to one temple also. So the starting score is 1 to 1. There may be other temples in the kingdom, but only the ones that are directly orthogonally adjacent count. Now Kermit was the attacker. He has to start. He plays 3 red temples from behind his screen. Fozzie looks at his tiles. He has 1 or 2 and says, oh, I'm going to lose. And so he says, I don't want to play any. You win. And he is allowed to do that. So Kermit wins the battle. Fozzie's king is kicked off the board. Kermit gets 1 red piece. All the tiles that were played in the fight from behind the screens get out of the game. They do not go back in the bag. And the fight is over. Kermit wins. Hooray! So some basic strategy that comes from this is having your leaders next to more temples keeps you in a better defensive position against someone trying to do a revolution, so that they can't just drop their piece in there and steal your spot. So getting yourself next to those 2 or maybe even 3 temples will hold your position even better. Now let's get to wars. Wars are much messier affairs. They happen when someone lays a tile to connect 2 kingdoms, and then those kingdoms have leaders of the same color. So we have 2 groups of tiles. Someone lays a tile to connect those, and as long as there's no leaders of the same color in those 2 kingdoms, we're all right. But say we've got a blue farmer in the one big group of tiles and a blue farmer in the other big group of tiles. Someone connects those, we have a war. And it could happen that there are more than one color at war. We could have a blue and green in one kingdom that's connected to another one that also has a blue and a green. So let's talk about what happens in that situation. But first, just remember that a war happens when kingdoms connect. Wars can get very messy, and they can result in huge changes in points and board position. So first, when someone lays a tile that will result in a war, you look at it and you say, oh, there's a black king there and there's a black king there. We're going to have a war. So you take that special tile that has a picture of 2 hands shaking. We put it on the connecting tile. Now, in a war, different than in a revolution, leaders fight with their respective colors. Blue's going to fight with blue tiles, black's going to fight with black tiles. Remember, in a revolution, we always fought with red. Determining your strength is a little different, but we play the tiles from our hands the same way. Your strength is how many tiles of your color that you have on your side of the kingdom. This is where it's important to look at that handshake, and you look on either side. Here's an example of a war. Fozzie and Kermit are at it again. Fozzie has a black king and some tiles connected, and Kermit has a black king and some tiles connected. Fozzie plays a tile that connects these 2 kingdoms. Now, there are 2 leaders there, so we have a problem. We must have a war. We take the handshake tile and we place it over on top of the connecting tile. Now, Fozzie connected, so he's considered the attacker. So he looks at his side of the board, his side of the kingdom, and sees that he has 2 black tiles on his side. And Kermit looks at his side of the kingdom that's about to be connected, and it has only 1 black tile. So that's the starting score, the number of tiles on your side of the kingdom. So the starting score is 2-1. Then, just like in the Revolution, players can play tiles from their hand. We're going to play with black this time. Fozzie's going to play 4 black tiles from out of his hand. So 4 plus 2, he has a score of 6. Now Kermit doesn't have that much. He only has 1. But he plays the 1 anyway. Final score is 6-2, and Fozzie wins. When you win a war, the loser's things blow up. So Kermit lost the war. His leader comes off the board, but also his black tile on that side of the kingdom comes off the board. The winner gets 1 point for each thing that came off the board. So since a black tile and a black leader came off the board, Fozzie will get 2 black points. Let's say Fozzie won the war and Kermit had 3 black tiles and his leader there. All those things would explode. The 3 tiles and the leader would come back to Kermit off the board. The tiles would go out of the game. And Fozzie then would get 4 points. 1, 2, 3 for the tiles and 1 for the leader. Now, as I said before, when you connect 2 huge kingdoms, it's very possible that you're going to have 2 or even 3 wars that could occur. So we might have one large kingdom with a black and a green leader, and another large kingdom with a black and a green leader, and they get connected. There's 2 wars there that could occur. Whoever connects the pieces there, they get the authority and the power to decide which will happen first. So they'll probably pick whatever benefits them most to happen first. So maybe they say, all right, we're going to black fight first. So then black will fight. Some pieces may explode. And so the kingdoms may or may not still be connected. If they are still connected, then you would have to fight that next war that would occur. If the 2 kingdoms are no longer connected, well, then you no longer have a problem. Now keep in mind, players are always allowed to play tiles wherever they want to. So if someone is particularly mischievous, they could take one of their tiles and connect two kingdoms that they don't even have leaders in, just to see what happens. You are allowed to start wars between other players, and it might be advantageous for you to do so. In the case that the connector is not involved with the fight, the person who is clockwise in turn order next is then considered the attacker, which is important because that is a disadvantage because they have to play tiles first and they lose ties. So those are the two different kinds of conflicts. Very briefly, here's what they are again. A revolution is a drop-in. You just take your leader, you put it in there, and you try to steal it. In this case, you always fight with adjacent red temples, and then you play with your red temples from your hand. Winner's going to get 1 red point and get to kick out the other leader. Wars. Wars are when we have kingdoms that connect together. You fight with whatever the color of the leader is. If it's green, you fight with green. If it's red, you fight with red. You get to start with whatever is on your side of the handshake, and then you add the tiles from behind your screen. And in wars, the tiles blow up from the loser, and those count as points for the winner. Now here's where it's significant to remember that at the end of every player's turn, every player refills up to 6 tiles, though it is at the end of the turn and not at the end of a battle. So if you are involved in multiple battles in a turn, you won't get to refresh your tiles in between them. However, if someone else attacks you, and then you get to refill, and then the next player's turn comes up and they get to attack you, then you'll always have 6 tiles at the start of each player's turn, so remember that. Okay, believe it or not, there are still 2 actions you can do on your turn that we haven't talked about, but to tell you the truth, they don't happen that often, and they're really not that complicated, so stick with me. The first one is catastrophes. Like I said, normally you're going to play tiles or play your wooden leader pieces, but every once in a while you will play a catastrophe tile or decide you want to sweep your tiles. So first let's talk about catastrophes. So you want to play a catastrophe, you take that catastrophe tile and you can play it on any square, empty or with a tile. You cannot play catastrophes on tiles that are holding a monument, a treasure, or a leader. Now if there's a tile there, it blows up that tile that is there. And now no tile may ever be laid again on that square for the rest of the game. So why would you want to do this? There are a lot of good reasons. Remember, leaders have to be next to temples. So if you blow up a temple supporting 1 or more leaders, you can get them off the board. You might want to drop a catastrophe to cut a kingdom into 2 parts. And that way you can sneak into a kingdom and get a monument without even having to fight. A lot of times you will lay a catastrophe tile with your first action to sort of clear out a nice kingdom, and then use your second action to take your leader tile and place it into that nice kingdom that just doesn't happen to have a leader there anymore. And then another use might be you just might play a catastrophe tile to make it harder for people to get in and connect to your kingdoms to possibly start a war with you. Remember, you only get 2 of these during the whole game, so use them wisely. And the last thing you can do is sweep your tiles. If you don't like your tiles, you can take all of them, or usually you just take the ones you don't like, and you discard them from the game, and replace them with new ones from the bag as one of your actions. You might do this before a big fight, for example. Maybe you want to fight on temples, so you'll sweep all your non-temples, and then as your second action, drop in to have that big revolution. Or maybe you do this because you have all blue tiles and a ton of blue points and nothing that you want to do with blue tiles. Or you could do it simply to end the game, as one of the ending conditions of the game is that the tile bag is empty. So that brings us to the end of the game. Players will continue to take turns around the circle, taking 2 actions around, until one of the following things happen. The game ends immediately at the end of a turn where someone can't refill back up to 6 tiles, or there are 2 or less treasures on the board. And this will happen because a lot of the kingdoms have connected all over the board. Keep in mind it ends immediately. There's no equal turns in this game, so you're going to want to be aware of when the game's going to end. So that is Tigris and Euphrates.